Start.
You live?
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody. As usual, I'll just start with some housekeeping issues. So can I remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and the recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please raise their hand if in the chamber or use the remote raise hand function? If a participant raises their hand via the remote function and is not subsequently invited to speak by myself, please could they turn their camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat. When invited to address by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphone and camera is on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this isn't possible for any reason, please just bring it to my attention or to Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function can be used to highlight any technical issues. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, please let myself or a Democratic Services Officer know. So, can I welcome all committee and non-committee elected members, co-opted representatives, cabinet members, our officers, Vale residents, public speakers, and to anyone else who is watching the live meeting broadcast. Moving straight on to the agenda, I believe we have a number of apologies for absence.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillors Ball, Penn and William, and also some apologies from our tenant representatives as well, Mrs Doyle, Mr Niblett and Mrs Mitchell.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the minutes of the previous meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee.
Chair,
I beg your pardon, Councillor Champion.
I think I need to give apologies for Councillor Ernest and Councillor Driscoll.
Councillor Driscoll's online, I believe, Councillor Champion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sorry. Oh, hi, Councillor Norman.
Hello there, how are you?
Did you have any apologies to offer, Councillor Norman? No, we've just started the committee.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's fine. If you'd just like to switch your camera off, thank you. Thank you very much. So we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting of the Place Scrutiny Committee held on the 16th of September 2025. Are members happy to approve the minutes? And if so, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Hooper, thank you. Would somebody second those? Councillor Drake?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And now we move on to declarations of interest. Are there any, please? Just me then. I need to declare in relation to agenda item 5, the Vale of Glamorgan Replacement Local Development Plan. I'm an independent member of Cardiff and Vale Health Board, who are a statutory consultee for the plan. My interest is personal and not prejudicial, so I will remain in the meeting. Before we begin the agenda proper, I just want to ensure that everybody understands the process that we're going to follow tonight. For those who don't know me, I'm Councillor Susan Lloyd-Selby. I chair this committee, which, including myself, has 13 members and additional non-voting co-opted representatives. The role of this scrutiny committee is to consider the information in the reports before us, listen to all the views expressed and consider whether or not we agree with the proposals before us or wish to make any recommendations back to the Cabinet for their consideration. We don't make the final decision on the proposals before us. That responsibility sits with Cabinet. Officers will first of all present the reports, and I'll then invite the Cabinet members who joined us if they want to make any comments or add any additional information, followed by members of the public who've joined us this evening. who I know are all here to speak on the revised local development plan. And then in line with the rules for public participation, each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak. I'll then invite any non-committee members who wish to speak. Non-committee members will have 5 minutes. And finally, members of the committee will debate the reports before us. Once all the formal debate is concluded, I'll summarise and draw out any recommendations as appropriate. So I hope that's all clear. And we now move on to agenda item 4, which is the local lettings policy. This report proposes changes to the lettings policy in some rural areas. And I believe we're joined by Nick Jones, the Operational Manager for Public Sector Housing. Nick, I think you're online this evening and you're going to take us through it. Thank you. Over to you, Nick.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, I've prepared some slides. Hopefully they're available to put on the screen.
Yeah, they're coming on now. My colleagues put them on now, Nick.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Mark. The slides are kind of just to give a little bit of structure to what I'm going to say and hopefully keep me on track as well. There are 5 recommendations in the local lettings policy report, but essentially what the report is asking to do is making the case for scrutiny to consider the existing approach to letting homes in rural areas, and also puts forward a proposal for some revisions or some ways of changing that. So I'll take you through the slides. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So starting with the definition of local lettings policies, I know some members will be very au fait with what they are and how they work, others less so. But essentially, local lettings policies give people living in local areas or rural areas an additional weighting when it comes to accessing social housing. And the aim of that is to create balanced, sustainable communities in rural areas. So if you can move on to the next slide, please. Where local lettings policies are applied, they're applied for all housing association, RSL, sorry, I should have put the full term there, is registered social landlords, also known as housing associations. So where housing associations build new housing developments, local lettings policies typically apply. They're mainly in rural areas, rural wards, and then tend to be negotiated separately with community councils. So there are some themes running through the existing local lettings policies, but there's also some differences as well, which have been put in place to reflect local circumstances. The next point is fairly important, and I'll talk about it here and come back to it a little bit later on as well, is that local lettings policies mainly apply in 2 different types of area or 2 different types of schemes. First of all, rural exception sites. These are small developments, typically outside of existing settlement boundaries, and there's some definitions in the report and some more detail of what constitutes a rural exception site. But they apply in those areas, but also on what we're describing as allocated sites or windfall sites in the local development plan. So those are typically wards in rural areas again, but they're larger developments. Rural exception sites are typically 10, 15 units or homes. The allocated sites are much bigger schemes. So I've given some examples there, Clare Gardens and also Cog Road in Surrey. So the case for reviewing, thank you. The case for reviewing the local lettings policies and the application of those really is the main underlying theme really is to achieve a balance, and that's between supporting existing communities and local people and sustainable communities, but also housing the people in greatest need, and those would include homeless households. Next slide, please. This information gives us a bit of an indication of how local lettings policies are operating currently, how they're working on the ground, and the pie chart on the left is where local lettings policies are operating, and the pie chart on the right is where there are no local lettings policies. So the key difference really is that in local lettings policies, just 60% of the homes are being allocated to people in acute housing need. And when I say acute housing need, I mean people on Gold Plus and Gold Band typically, whereas by contrast in local, where there are no local lettings policies, 93% of the allocations are going to people in housing in acute housing need, so Gold Plus and Gold Band. So a really significant difference there. Where there are local lettings policies in place, quite a significant proportion of those go to people with low or no identified housing need. So if you could flip to the next slide, please. So based on that and our requirement to help people in great need, we're trying to sort of review and propose an alternative approach, really, to try and strike that balance between supporting existing people and local communities, but also assisting and doing what we can to assist in homeless people as well. So the proposed approach separates the 3 different sites. So in rural exception sites, there's a planning requirement that local lettings policies exist and they remain in place in perpetuity. So there's no plans to change that current approach. So those would be protected. Schemes within minor rural settlements, we're proposing that local lettings policies would continue in those areas. So local people having an extra weighting in terms of access in social housing. So minor rural settlements, there's a table, I think, in the report setting out the nature of those settlements, but they're typically smaller villages in more rural areas. And the block on the right-hand side of this graphic sort of suggests the case in other areas, how it would work across the rest of the Vale, and proposes a cascade or a managed approach where homes get allocated to people with a local connection, but also acute or higher levels of housing need. And we're proposing as well that that would apply in the first phase of lettings. So the next slide, I think, gives us a bit of extra detail in terms of this cascade managed approach. So this is how we would be proposing to allocate, really. In the first instance, somebody with a strong local connection, but also acute housing need. After that, somebody who's just in acute housing needs or without the strong local connection. Then we'd move down to the 3rd tier, which would be a strong local connection and a housing need, i.e. a silver plus or a silver band, and so on and so forth. I won't read out the different things, but you can see strong local connection and housing need being first, and then just housing need and moving down. So to try to get away from the letting homes to people who've got a very strong local connection, but very low housing needs. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So the proposal, and these are some of the key points there, is just to achieve a balance between local needs and people in the greatest needs. And I think I mentioned that a second ago. The cascade approach we're proposing would apply to the first phase of lettings only, and subsequently future lettings of homes would be via Homes for You in the usual way. The cascade approach would apply to new housing developments across all parts of the Vale rather than just in rural areas. And the effect of that would be that the existing local lettings policies which have been in place currently would cease to exist. So the next slide, please. I think we're coming to the end of the presentation, really. So the recommendation, and as I said, there are 5 recommendations on the approach, but on the report. But essentially, the main thing is there to sort of for members, hopefully, to consider the approach being taken to local lettings policies, give some feedback so that we can develop a final proposal to go back to Cabinet for approval. So I think that's the main essence of the report. And Chair, I'm happy to sort of provide any points of clarification or answer any questions from members if there are any.
Thank you very much, Nick. Can I just ask if there are any non-committee members who want to ask any questions or make any comments in relation to this before I bring in committee members? No? In that case, committee members, Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Nick. Just a couple of points for clarification and maybe it'll help us in our decision. Has there been any modelling done of what this will be in terms of the percentages that have currently been achieved as opposed to the new cascade process? So if it was without a cascade, you get to 90%, what would it be with this proposal? Do you have any idea on that, any sort of modelling? And if there hasn't been, I think it'd be appropriate if there was. And it's a linked question, the second part of this, is that silver band people will find it an increasing struggle to break into this, because if you look at that 90%, it's gold and gold plus are the vast majority, understandably. I'm just wondering how many silver band people who are on a silver band at the moment would therefore struggle to find a house, whereas previously they would have done. Do you have any idea on those? Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Councillor. Nick, are you happy to respond to those now, please? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. There are, I think the graphic on the presentation gave an overview of in terms of how it's working at the moment across all of the housing stock. In the narrative of the report, there's some examples where we've actually taken a number of schemes and tried to drill into those to get a clearer indication of how the policies are working out. I'm not in a position to give you specific numbers of how many of different bands would be successful, etc. But clearly, with a revised proposal, the people in local connection areas, there's so many people on the general housing waiting list in Gold Plus and Gold Band. There's 10% of the waiting list is actually Gold Plus at the moment, and there's 7% of the waiting list is Gold. So you're right to make the point that in future, under a managed approach, because that second category is people in acute housing needs, there would be few instances where we would then be going down into the silver bands, and fewer again that would be in the bronze bands. So the people in less or no identified housing need, there would be far less people in those categories housed than currently.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Charles Champion, please.
I can't see in the report typical Gold Plus. Would that be a single parent with dependents? What is a silver? What is a bronze?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Nick. Can you clarify that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Gold Plus is the most extreme housing need, and typically that's homeless households living in temporary accommodation. It's also people with acute medical needs which are not met by their current accommodation. It does include people who are in refuge fleeing domestic abuse. So the people at the extreme end. There's within the Homes for You policy, which is the overarching allocation scheme for the council, there are some detailed tables of all the breakdown of all of the different bands, really. But the Gold Plus band is the most acute needs. And then to give you some examples as well of silver bands, there'll be people who are overcrowded, who are lacking access to some facilities, etc. And bronze is typically their housing needs are met by their current accommodation, but want to move, really. So it might be somebody who's in an affordable private rented flat who's looking to move into a council flat, but the current accommodation is suitable for their needs, it's affordable, etc. So hopefully that gives a bit of a flavour. But like I say, within the policy, I think there's about 3 or 4 pages giving the detailed breakdown of what's in each of the different bands.
Thank you, Nick. Any other questions or comments? Cabinet Member Councillor Perks, I know you're with us on the call. I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I'll give you an opportunity if you want to come in, but I can see Councillor Perks, did you want to add anything to that? I think you've still got some connection problems, Councillor Perks. I'm afraid we can't see you or hear you. So we'll move on to Councillor Carys-Dallard, please.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I appreciate that there's a homelessness crisis, and I welcome any attempts to try to address that. But as a member who represents a rural community, I also welcome the fact that local connections are still being prioritised in local areas, because I think, some of our rural communities are so poorly served in terms of things like transport and amenities, that you need people with, local connections and support networks to, make living in these places viable sometimes. Whereas if you haven't got any of those, extended family, the help that having an extended family provides, then, makes life quite difficult in some rural communities. So I welcome the report.
Thank you, Councillor. I want to build on that, if I may, Nick, because in relation to the cascade approach that's being proposed for all new lets, which are not rural exception sites, etc., it makes absolute sense to me that approach should be used, because as you've pointed out in your presentation, what it attempts to do is to balance the importance, it recognises the importance of local connections. And as Councillor Stallard has said, there are some real challenges in rural areas in terms of cost of properties, etc. but it also quite rightly prioritises those who are in the greatest housing need. So I think the approach makes absolute sense. What I don't understand is why that's only being proposed for the first phase, because surely the needs of local people within those local communities in terms of the challenges they face are likely to continue. So I don't understand why we're not proposing this approach in perpetuity and why we're just saying it's the first phase only.
Yeah, Chair, of course. In terms of the legislation around housing allocations, it's obviously a very sort of well legislated area. There's an accompanying code of guidance in relation to allocations, and that makes specific reference to local lettings policies. And within that code of guidance, it sort of makes the case or indicates that local lettings policies should be by sort of exception. They shouldn't dominate the council's allocation scheme. So they shouldn't be a disproportionate amount of total lettings made via local lettings policies. They should also be time limited in a lot of instances and subject to regular review as well. So I think if we were looking across the board to let everything via local lettings policies all of the time, effectively, that would undermine our overarching housing allocations policy and mean that local lettings policies did dominate that. So, you know, we've very much written this approach as you would expect us to, really, with one eye on the legislation. I think the other point I'd probably look to make is when the development is new. I guess that's a critical stage because there's a lot of people, a lot of families all moving into new homes at the same time, and that balanced communities argument is important then, so that people knit together and know each other and get on well and start to sort of build that community. The turnover in the Vale is very low, and in rural areas it's extremely low. So the relets become available very infrequently. So I think we wouldn't see that necessarily as a threat to the existing balanced communities then, because that would be very much a drip feed of new families moving into new developments. So I think the local lettings policies apply or help in that first instance in terms of creating that community. But subsequently, there's because of the low turnover, there's less risk of that being threatened as time goes on.
Thank you. Very helpful clarification. Councillor Perry, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it's a little bit off topic, but I keep being thrown out of this meeting, and I think you just said Sandra Perks was having problems. I'm just wondering how many members are having problems with their app freezing and then being removed from the meeting. So I'm only catching bits, and I'm missing quite a bit of the discussion.
Okay, Councillor Perry, thank you. If you're able to use the chat, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, to raise any technical issues, that's helpful rather than interrupting the flow of the meeting. If this is the only way you can bring those issues, that's absolutely fine. So officers, I don't know if there's anything that you're able to do to assist Councillor Perry to ensure that he's able to fully participate.
My colleague has been trying to assist him. He has indicated that he's having intimate issues, so he'll obviously try and get back in touch again now if he can.
Councillor Perry, I think officers are doing their best to try and address the issues. So I'm really sorry that you're not able to hear the whole debate. And hopefully we'll be able to resolve that. Councillor Hooper, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on Councillor Stallard's point, which I understand. But if you look at the policy as it's set out in this, the smallest settlement that we're referring to that's going to be changing, I think it's Llandoch. It's either Llandoch or Sully, one or the other, which are close to other communities as well. So all of the communities that I think she was referencing are all covered by the existing LLP. So this looks to be something that we're trying to keep communities together as best we can. So I think this is a policy to be recommended, and it's got my support.
Thank you, Councillor. Any comments or questions from anybody else? If not, I'll move to the recommendations. No, I don't see any hands. So as you said, Nick, there are 5 recommendations before us. The first is that we should consider the approach. Well, we've done that. Second, that Scrutiny considers a proposal that in future local lettings policies should continue to be applied on rural exception sites and in minor rural settlements, and these policies remain in perpetuity, i.e. for future relets of existing social rented homes. I move that recommendation. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hooper, thank you. Then that Scrutiny consider the merits of a cascade staged approach to be utilised in future for all new lets which are not on rural exception sites or within minor rural settlements. This would give households with a local connection and acute housing need priority in the first phase of lettings on new housing developments. Subsequent lettings would be via the housing waiting list. I move that recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hooper, thank you. That feedback from Scrutiny informs the final proposal to be considered for approval by Cabinet. I think there is no feedback for Cabinet other than support for the proposal. That the list of minor rural settlements where local lettings policies would apply be reviewed following the adoption of the replacement local development plan, and I move that recommendation. Councillor Hooper, thank you for seconding it. So thank you very much, Nick, for joining us this evening. You're very welcome as ever to stay for the rest of the meeting, but equally if you want to leave and get on with the rest of your evening, please do so. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Chair.
So now we move on to agenda item 5, the Vale Glamorgan Replacement Local Development Plan 2021 to 2036, Housing Growth in Barry. This report is a reference from Cabinet. And just to remind committee, the preferred strategy has already been agreed by the Council. This report proposes to add 3 new sites in Barry in place of the site in North East Barry that was in the original plan. And also to remind committee that there will be an opportunity for further comments on this matter when the deposit plan is published, which I believe will be in January. But no doubt officers will correct me if I've got that wrong. We're joined by Ian Robinson, the Head of Sustainable Development. Ian, I think you're going to take us through that. So over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's right. Your summary is correct. This item relates to a consultation which was carried out earlier this year in respect of a potential amendment to the strategy that was approved by Council in September of 2024. So I'm just going to summarise the kind of the key points that came out of the consultation exercise, what we see as being the kind of balanced response to that, and then summing up with those recommendations. So the preferred strategy focuses on, thanks Gareth, focuses on development in a strategic growth area. So those are the areas that are best served by public transport and facilities with employment opportunities, and as far as possible reduce the need to travel. In the previous strategy that was approved by Council, there were 5 key sites included, one of those being North East Barry, which identified up to 900 units in the planned period. Full Council, as noted just now, approved that strategy in September 24, and that would form the basis for the subsequent deposit plan, which is essentially a draft of the full detail of the proposed local development plan. As you noted, Chair, the key points in that strategy were approved already, and the total housing requirement and the broad spatial distribution have therefore been agreed. There have been deliverability issues that came to light with the site in North East Barry, which has obligated us to consider alternatives in the same spatial area. Other areas already accommodating growth within the strategy include Roos and St Athan and Dinas Powys, and given Barry's status as the kind of highest tier settlement in the Vale of Glamorgan in terms of sustainability, there is an expectation and a need that Barry will take some housing growth over the planned period, not least because of the very pressing affordable housing need in Barry. There we go. The local housing market assessment identifies a Vale-wide need for just over 1,000 new affordable homes per year over the next 5 years, and almost half of this need is in Barry. And I think it should be noted in respect of kind of the biggest of the 3 sites that we're looking at this evening, that in Islington Ward there are over 300 households on the Homes for You waiting list. There are 4,000 households on the housing register who have expressed a preference to live in Barry, and nearly 900 of those are deemed to not be appropriately housed. I think Nick gave some examples just now of what might comprise kind of inappropriate and inadequate housing. Collectively, the 3 housing sites that were the subject of the consultation could contribute just under 225 new affordable homes. The Vale is in a national growth area as identified in Future Wales, and members that have been part of previous presentations relating to this RLDP process will be aware of the emphasis we place on Future Wales and our obligation to make sure that our local development plan aligns with national policy. So we sit in an area with Cardiff and Newport and the Valleys where national policy says we're in a growth area. There's an expectation of housing and employment growth, and in the most sustainable settlements where there are already services, facilities and public transport. So we received initially 11 sites through the candidate site process. So that's the process early on in our development of the RLDP, and they are shown on the plan on this slide. The red ones were considered not suitable or not deliverable for a variety of reasons. The 2 larger green sites that you can see, the very big one towards the top of the plan is the site that was included in the strategy previously, and the larger of the 3 sites that in this most recent consultation, the one near Waycott Cross, is shown towards sort of the left-hand side of the plan, but you can see the spatial distribution generally around the perimeter of the town, and that's not particularly surprising given that this is, a further iteration of a development plan for the Vale of Glamorgan, and we've got an existing local development plan which is allocated land and a unitary development plan before that, and finding sustainable sites in kind of core inner settlement locations understandably becomes more difficult because those sites are over time become developed. There were no large deliverable brownfield sites submitted, and no suitable land in extreme proximity to the railway stations in the town. We did progress some work in relation to a brownfield site near to For the Millennium. That wasn't deliverable due to sort of legal constraints relating to the site, but we have done a kind of very robust exercise in kind of looking at the capacity of the town, looking at where brownfield sites lie, to try and understand and put forward what we consider to be the best options within the town. The final note on this slide is just that allocating sites in areas other than Barry would not address Barry's critical affordable housing need. Next slide, please, Gareth. So I'll just run briefly through the 3 sites that were the subject of the consultation. The first one, the smallest one, is land at Neptune Road at Barry Waterfront. That would provide up to 40 dwellings, 100% affordable. 33 representatives made comments, and we did receive more support than objection. Support generally due to the location and the 100% affordable housing provision. There were nevertheless some concerns raised regarding traffic congestion, infrastructure capacity, and the loss of the site for its kind of initially envisaged use as a hotel. Next slide, please. The second site is land at Hayes Lane at the Bendricks. This would be up to 70 dwellings, again 100% affordable and potentially a council housing scheme. We received 48 representatives making 51 representations, as a mix of support, objection and comment. The support was due to it being considered to be generally a good use of previously developed land and potentially preferable to further employment use in the area. The grounds of objection were similar to those I just listed for Neptune Road. And some, as you note there, some representatives felt the site should be retained for employment purposes. And finally, the largest of the 3 sites, the land at Northwest Barry, where there could be 376 dwellings proposed, 30% affordable in line with viability and current policy. We received, through the course of the consultation exercise, 139 representations from 129 respondents. There was limited support, just 14 comments and over 120 objections to that. The support was in relation to addressing affordable housing need, and the objections were principally on the grounds of traffic, potential drainage and flooding issues, impact on the historic environment, infrastructure capacity, impact on biodiversity in Porthkerry Park, the loss of greenfield land and impact on biodiversity, and loss of part of the green wedge. Further, there were queries about whether there was actually need for more housing there. Further queries related to why the site is being promoted now when it's previously been refused. It's got some points here, some key points in relation to infrastructure. There is strategic transport work ongoing, and that is at a relatively advanced stage of preparation. And this considers not just the impact of these sites, but the cumulative impact of the RLDP growth as a whole. So we're in a relatively kind of beneficial position now in respect of that issue compared to where we were when we considered the strategy the first time, because we are more advanced in that work and more advanced in our understanding of what mitigation is possible at key junctions to try and address the traffic impacts and the concerns being raised in those regards. So we are comfortable that the RLDP traffic can be mitigated with nil detriment, particularly at Waycock Cross. Each of the key sites that have been identified all would have an element of impact on that junction. So each would bear kind of responsibility for part of the mitigation. So further work is being done at the moment in regards to how that would be delivered. But I think for us, the key headline there is that our transport consultant is very positive about the scope to mitigate those transport impacts and those traffic impacts at Waycock Cross, which is quite clear from the consultation is a really key area of concern and a key junction in the strategic highway network. In terms of education, we've been in close consultation with our education colleagues, and where additional school places are required, the developer would be required to fund additional capacity through Section 106 agreements. We would envisage open space being delivered on site, given the size of the site, the needs to mitigate the impacts of the development in that way, rather than requiring contributions. Dialogue with the Health Board is ongoing. The Health Board have, in their most recent response, said they welcome that dialogue. We are expecting them to report back to us on some of their capacity work, I think towards the end of the month. But as I said, that dialogue is ongoing. And Welsh Water have confirmed that there is sufficient capacity at the wastewater treatment works. So just in conclusion on the key points for now, obviously I can come back to any range of points raised later. The consultation is concerned with the principle of replacing the key site in North East Barry with these others, including in particular the largest of those at North West Barry. There have been a mix of views expressed, some support, but notably more objection to those sites. Overall, there were significantly less objections to North West Barry than we experienced in the consultation to the North East Barry site in 2024. The concerns raised by the public are valid. They're all relevant planning issues, and they need and have needed through the period since the consultation to now further consideration to kind of refine our understanding of those impacts. As I noted just now, we feel there are positive impacts, positive options available for mitigation, particularly in respect of transport, but also the kind of wide range of issues that we try and mitigate with Section 106 agreements in terms of sustainable transport use, community facilities, education, etc. Whilst the concerns are noted, as I emphasised before, there is a absolute pressing need for housing in Barry. There's a really high level of affordable housing need. But we also are looking to develop the area in line with national policy, in line with aspirations to try and bring investment and growth into the area. That's jobs and employment as well as housing. And on balance, officers are of the view that these sites should be taken forward into the deposit replacement local development plan. And I'll just finally touch on next steps and that kind of timeline before passing back to you, Chair. Any comments from the Place Scrutiny Committee will be considered by Cabinet on I think it's the 20th of November, before then full council on the 1st of December this year. The report recommendation is that the 3 potential housing sites be approved as allocations in the deposit replacement local development plan. If approved, the deposit plan will be reported politically at the end of this year and early 2026 for potential approval to proceed to a public consultation. And I know, Chair, you referred earlier to subsequent opportunities for any stakeholders and members of the public to inform that process. And as as there's more kind of meat on the bones of the plan in terms of the detail, and as there's more information available in terms of mitigation of some of those impacts, the deposit plan will allow all interested parties to make those representations on not just allocations, but all policies that will be presented. And those are the policies which govern how we make decisions on a day-to-day basis on all planning applications, whether that be new housing proposals, things going on in our town centres, where new jobs and employment lie. And following that, that will be reported back to council once we have a report of the consultation responses to the deposit plan consultation. If council is minded to approve that plan would then move forward for consideration by an independent planning inspector. And if the inspector finds the plan sound, it would then come back to the council for adoption. I'll leave it there for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. I know the responsible cabinet member, Councillor Ruba Sivnianum, has joined us in committee tonight. Councillor Sivnianum, did you want to add anything or make any comment? Please do.
Thank you, Chair. I think Ian has covered the main points. I suppose the point that I would reiterate is, this isn't just about providing houses; it's providing homes in sustainable locations. And Ian has outlined, the mitigations and the improvements that we can make in taking this forward. And just to remind members that if this site is removed, then we will have to look for other sites, because we are an area of growth, and I'm proud that we're an area of growth. And we have aspirations for growth. And if this site is removed, then we'll have to look sort of lower down the list, if you like, in our strategy for places which may not be as suitable. And those places might include Cowbridge and further out. Barry is a growth area. Barry does have the highest need for homes, and I would ask all members to consider that when looking at this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We've received written representation on the report on behalf of Porthcurry Wildlife Group, so I just want to thank the group for their submission. All committee members have had a copy of that written submission and have had an opportunity to consider that, and we'll consider that as part of the deliberations this evening. We've got 5 members of the public who've registered to speak. You're all very welcome here this morning. Committee is very interested to hear your views. As you know, you've got 3 minutes to speak. So, Mr. Holloman, would you like to begin? Yeah, thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of speaking, and also commend the officer's report. It's a very well-written report. I'm concerned about the isolation of this site. We're talking about Northwest Barry now, right? The walking time means that most of the people will not walk to the station. And therefore, there's an issue there about the transport, the strategic transport assessment, possibly, if that's the right vehicle, to look at public transport, possibly. And also the railway station at Barry, the capacity of the car park is overstretched now. And if you get more people driving from that site to the station, we're going to have traffic problems. The content of the development, we've got an aging population, and I think some consideration should be given for this site for suitable accommodation for the elderly, which will in fact release perhaps bigger accommodation elsewhere in the town to be used. You've touched on water and sewerage in your report, but currently there is a problem there with the Millwood pumping station overflowing and sewage going through Porthcurry Park, which is totally unacceptable, and I would hope that that would be corrected in the development. The ponds, with all the rain that we've just had, you know, will these ponds be sufficient to actually cope with that? And of course, ponds going to attract insects, vermin. They could be a hazard to children, so there should be some management plan for the landscaped areas. The council needs to commit to maintaining the ponds and landscaping after the lifetime has expired. And what happens is a fund is provided for the lifetime of maintenance of that. It should be a restricted fund, and the council should say yes, and once that fund has been used up, we will maintain the site. I think the biggest decision the council has to make is breaking through the green wedge. I think that's a big decision, which has got implications just not for Barry, but once you do it once, how many more times are you going to do it? You've touched on the traffic. The 2014 findings from the previous planning application concluded development of the site would be detrimental to the capacity and free flow of traffic on the strategically important A4226, which links directly to Cardiff Airport. And that still stands, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holloman. Committee members, do you have any points of clarification for Mr. Holloman in terms of the information that he's given this evening? No, I don't see any hands. Thank you very much, Mr. Holloman. In that case, we move on to Mr. William Hart, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also talking about the development proposed at North West Barry near Waycott Cross. I think developing that site would take away from the public a really beautiful natural landscape in the valley. Existing housing there is very low density with large gardens, and on the plans shown at the public consultation, high density housing was shown alongside existing properties, indicating that the development was being focused on the proposal only and showing no respect for the existing community. New lower density housing was shown along the Cwmcuddy edge of the area because I guess it would be more valuable then. The developer is leading the planning and he has scant regard for existing community. I quote Councillor Burnett when she said, "Developers do not care about community, they build houses, not homes, and are interested in profit, not people." Although Porthcurry Park is to be extended towards the housing estate as part of the proposed development, it is towards an area which is prone to flooding. The existing drainage copes by utilising a natural flood area in the fields, and the proposal substitutes this with an artificial flood defence to try and control the increased concentration of surface water. This would be a health hazard during dry spells, and although we are told that the treatment plant on Cogmore can cope with increased demand, Welsh Water do not cope well with even the current flow of sewage, which is witnessed by the warnings from the Safer Season Rivers app every time it rains. Rainfall has increased by 13% since the 60s, and the rate is rapidly rising. The public footpath along Cwmcuddy is not a public highway and not suitable for cyclists because of 2 kissing gates necessary for livestock control. All other connections to existing places are only available by the road connection, which will form a bottleneck on the estate, as well as more disruption on Port Road. The site is not well connected for education. Junior and infant school pupils will face an extensive downhill walk to current schools, and a walk home will be too demanding for them, especially when cold and wet. Cars will be used. The site is not well connected for essential shopping. The only nearby retail outlets are the Co-op at Waycott Cross and possibly the Tesco near Highlight Park. Currently neither copes with demand. Residents will drive to Culverhouse Cross or Barry Docks to shop. None of the current GP surgeries are within walking distance for a person needing care, and people will drive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hart. Again, committee members, are there any points of clarification that you want to raise with Mr. Hart? No. In that case, we move on to Mr. Andrew Vincent, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I want to cast my remarks in relation to a document, Placemaking Wales Charter, which has invoked the Vale's aspiration to develop high-quality places that work for the benefit of communities. It's through that lens I want to look at some of the placemaking principles, particularly in relation to the Green Wedge itself. Now, we understand the Green Wedge is now being redefined, yet it seems oddly that the Waycock Cross site and the Green Wedge seems only to figure in current planning proposals largely because of a failure to purchase land on the preferred Northeast Barry site. Essentially, Waycock Cross is probably easier to push through than the Northeast site. This is not, though, I would say, a strong argument for redefining the Green Wedge. I refer here to the annex that's a response to the residents. The council response in Annex 1 unexpectedly, I think, acknowledges that the Green Wedge is there, and I quote from the document, to prevent urban coalescence, protect the countryside from encroachment, and safeguard the setting of urban areas. However, then comes a but, namely the Green Wedge, I quote, are not permanent and need to change reflect changing circumstances. Annex 1 continues then that it sees a need for a continued justification for maintaining the Green Wedge between the settlements of Barry and Roos. That is, limiting development and preventing urban coalescence and safeguarding what they call the identities of Barry and Roos. However, Annex 1 continues and claims that the identity of the area of, for example, Barry, will change inevitably, but at the same time he says it will, quote, improve the boundary between the urban edge of Barry and the agricultural land. Well, I think looking at the document in detail, if you are confused by what I've just said, you are not alone in being confused. In summary, I think what's happening here is the following. The council annex response to the asserts that the Green Wedge, 1, both is and is not justifiable as a policy. 2, it is and is not an important demarcation between the urban and the rural. 3, it lays down principled planning limits, that is the Green Wedge, but these can be changed at any time. 4thly, it provides a clear urban-rural boundary, but this can be abandoned whenever needed. Is there any policy logic there? I can't see it myself. In conclusion, however configured, the proposed Waycock site will take Barry closer to Roos and indeed the airport. I fail to see how the proposed destruction of the existing Green Wedge, increasing housing density, clear urban coalescence, and the massively unresolved traffic problems is developing what the placemaking calls high-quality places that work for the benefit of the community. As far as I can see, put simply, they don't do that. They're doing the precise opposite. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent. Again, any points of clarification from any committee members? No. In that case, we move on to Ms. Rebecca Vincent Newson, who I believe is joining us online. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm also going to use the lens of the placemaking principles to frame my comments about Waycock Cross. The placemaking principle of people and community prioritises the health and well-being of all people from the outset and states that new developments should protect or enhance a sense of community. But when concerns were raised by residents about the impact on health infrastructure, for instance, we know that demand on primary healthcare will increase by 11%, no mitigation or assurances were given in the council's response, other than to state that the council will be in discussion with the health board, which the health board welcomes. In the same way, concerns about noise and air pollution for local residents, as well as increased travel times for people in surrounding communities, haven't been adequately addressed. As a local community, our lived experience of living in an already congested area with poor transport links seems to have been ignored. In fact, the council's response on this topic even goes so far as to seemingly dismiss the STA modelling that they themselves have commissioned as too cautious. Instead, there's mention of greater reliance on existing bus routes and active travel, which in reality is wholly insufficient. Now, this leads me directly into the placemaking principle of movement, where walking, cycling and public transport are prioritised and well-designed routes connect to the wider public transport network and stations. Despite residents raising their well-placed concerns and experience of insufficient public transport, the council's response was to state that bus service 304 connects to Barry Station and bus services B1 and B2 connect Pontypridd Road to Barry and beyond. But this isn't accurate. None of these bus services go near to Barry Station, and furthermore, the B1 service only serves Waycott Cross and Pontypridd Road once a day at 5:18 p.m, while the B2 service doesn't pass Pontypridd Road until 9:42 in the morning. Finally, the placemaking principle of identity commits to value and respect existing places, their uniqueness, heritage, and natural and physical attributes. As the Vale Council itself said previously when rejecting the last planning application, Waycott Cross is a sensitive location between urban and rural land with a defensible clear-cut boundary differentiating between urban Barry and the countryside beyond. This proposal seems in no way to respect the open landscape of the area, a feature that's unique within Barry. Indeed, residents have historically migrated to the Waycott Cross area precisely due to its location at this natural open boundary. And this uniqueness will be lost to future generations forever if the proposed development proceeds. Barry will no longer be a diverse mix of differing communities if everywhere becomes the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any points of clarification from committee members? No, in that case, we move on to our final public speaker, Mr. Jason Vincent Newson, who is also online. Thank you.
Thank you. As others have done, I also plan to speak through the lens of the placemaking principles of the Placemaking Wales Charter, where it states that all new development should promote these principles in the planning, design and management of new and existing places. In terms of the recent report, I would therefore like to highlight what I feel are significant shortcomings in the Vale's responses to the concerns raised by residents, particularly on the matter of traffic congestion. The placemaking principle of location states that places should grow and develop in a way that uses land efficiently, supports and enhances existing places, and is well connected. The location of housing and other facilities should be planned to help reduce the need to travel. The potential for the proposed development to cause significant additional traffic congestion in the area was recognised as long ago as 1990, a previous unsuccessful planning application, and again during the most recent planning refusal in 2015. Indeed, it was recorded in the minutes of the Vale Council Planning Committee meeting at the time, where the committee stated that, and I quote, "This proposal will be detrimental to the capacity and free flow of traffic on the A4226, which links with Cardiff Airport, as it fails to mitigate the effects of up to 200 dwellings, now planned to be 376, on the highway network and roundabouts which are at or over capacity in peak hours. This assessment is as true now as it was then, if not more so. Yet despite this clear concern highlighted by the Planning Committee in 2015, the Council's current response to these same concerns is to simply refer to the interim findings of the recent Strategic Transport Assessment, which suggests, and I quote, that while there are locations where congestion is forecast, particularly during peak hours, these challenges can be managed through a balanced package of measures including targeted highway improvements and initiatives to encourage more sustainable travel. To suggest that these targeted highway improvements, such as widening and or extension of roundabout approach roads, which themselves were previously considered, might somehow mitigate the significant increased congestion is optimistic at best and disingenuous at worst. Likewise, hopeful talk that increased home working and greater use of sustainable travel might in some way alleviate increased congestion fails completely to recognise that a major cause of increased traffic levels will simply be as a result of residents of the new development making frequent short local journeys, for instance going shopping to the Tesco supermarket under a mile away, a journey that would never be considered for walking or cycling, but that will contribute significantly to traffic congestion on and around the Waycott Cross roundabout. Finally, regarding travel for commuting purposes, the placemaking principle of movement states that walking, cycling and public transport are prioritised to provide a choice of transport modes and avoid dependence on private vehicles. Despite this, the only possible active travel route between Waycott Cross and Barry train station is a hilly, indirect route, which can easily take double the suggested time in the other direction due to the steep uphill gradients on the way. To suggest that somehow residents of the new development would seriously consider walking or cycling to or from Barry station is simply unrealistic. In conclusion, Taking all the above into account, I believe it's evident that the proposed development remains clearly in direct contravention of these placemaking charter principles, and the Council's responses in the report have done little to address this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent Newson. Again, any points of clarification from committee members? No, in that case, thank you very much to everybody for your contribution. Those are a lot of issues. I suspect that we are also going to hear some similar points from non-committee and committee members. But Ian, if I can ask you to respond to as much of that now as you can, bearing in mind that I'm sure we're going to come back to some of these issues when we get into the formal debate. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll do my best to get through all of those issues. I'll take them in order from the speakers, from first to fifth. The first point is, I mean, it touches on many of the points raised through all the speakers, and that's about, I think Mr. Holliman referred to it as isolation, and yeah, that's been kind of given context as, you know, how long it would take to walk or cycle to the station. Is it realistic people will make those trips? But also reference to education facilities, shops and health facilities and things like that. My perspective on this is that sustainability is not a binary concept. Something isn't sustainable or not. It's a sliding scale, and you could have some sites which are in a town centre or right next to a train station that are highly sustainable right at the top end, and you have some sites in the middle of the countryside that are not sustainable for almost by any definition, and there's a lot of space in between. I would love nothing more than for us to find 20 hectares of land right next to Barry train station or right on the town centre, but that land doesn't exist. So we need to consider, in the context of all the pressing needs upon us, what are the most sustainable sites, and are there realistic options, a realistic range of options for occupiers of that site? Now, we feel there are. That's not to say that I think every person in that site would make every trip, or even most of their trips, on foot or by bike, but they are reasonable options. You can walk from that site to local facilities and to the train stations. You could cycle. But furthermore, if people did need to make vehicular trips, they are very short vehicular trips, and that is a lot more sustainable than siting new dwellings in locations where you have much longer vehicular trips or only the option of the car. So I understand the points about proximity and whether a typical person about to make a typical trip to the shops would choose to do that on foot or by car. But this is still at the top end of sustainability in terms of the candidate sites submitted to us, and in the context of housing need and in the context of the other sites proposed on other settlements, we feel this is a sufficiently sustainable site. It's certainly no less sustainable than the other site of North East Barry, which the council resolved to approve, and it's certainly no less sustainable than the other sites, the other key strategic sites in the strategy, which have already been approved by council. In terms of traffic, the STA is robust in that it doesn't assume big modal shifts. It's robust in terms of almost assuming worst case scenario for the proportion that would of trips that we made by car. There's been No, I will do in order. I was going to flip to the last speaker and his points on traffic, but I'll do in order because otherwise I'll confuse myself. Continuing to go through Mr. Holliman's points, elderly accommodation. Generally, this kind of thing is driven by the market. So if there is a demonstrable evidence need for that kind of accommodation, that the market will provide it, or if our housing colleagues tell us that there is a demonstrable need for it, then we can potentially require it. It's a detailed point, and it's a relevant point to consider, but it's not something that goes to the heart of the principle of this as an allocation. I appreciate Mr. Holliman may not have been saying it's a point of principle, but I'm just making that point. The pumping station, yes. So further modelling may be required to understand the impacts and necessary mitigation at the local pumping station, and that is something that can happen as part of the planning application, and developers would be required required to fund any improvements that Welsh Water advise would be needed to mitigate any capacity issues through the context the context of a planning application. I fully agree in respect of sums for ongoing management and maintenance. That's absolutely necessary, and again that can be delivered alongside a planning permission if this is allocated and once we have a planning application to consider. Mr. Holloman mentioned the green wedge, and this obviously then came up again. The green wedge is important, and it does have purposes of preventing coalescence and maintaining the openness of the countryside. When the previous applications were submitted, it was countryside. There were adequate allocations in the existing local development plan to meet housing need across the plan period. So in that context, where you have a structured way of delivering the necessary growth across this 15-year period, there is no overriding justification for developing further on countryside in the green wedge. It is unfortunately necessary when we come to the end of a plan period and we're looking at housing need across the following period to look at urban fringe locations where there aren't adequate kind of in a town or in a settlement and brownfield sites. That's not to say that the green wedge isn't important. It would still provide a function. There would still be a significant gap between Barry and Roos, and in my opinion, the kind of the character and the setting of the identity of those settlements, if you like, would be maintained insofar as that there would not be close to coalescence or merging of those two settlements. So yes, the green wedge remains important, but again, that has to be considered in the context of housing need. If there wasn't an identified housing need, and if we weren't in a growth area identified as an area that needs to contribute towards regional investment in jobs and housing, then we wouldn't be looking to develop on greenfield sites. But the need to develop to meet those policy and housing aims has to be seen in balance with the kind of the function of the green wedge and the value of those green fields. Moving on to Mr. Hart, the initial point related to loss of landscape, and that's, I guess, very similar to the green wedge point. Again, we don't advocate for developing in the countryside unless there is a fundamental need, and allocating housing in a local development plan is probably the primary occasion where a council will advocate for developing on greenfield land where there are those very important strategic needs identified. Otherwise, countryside is protected very tightly in planning policy. In terms of the densities, I guess the conundrum with density is respecting the character of the existing areas, but also being efficient with the use of land. So we have policies in our local development plan that promote higher densities than probably had been the case prior to this local development plan. And that's because to meet the equivalent housing need at lower density, you need more land. And this is a greenfield location, and we don't want to be needing to use more land than is absolutely necessary. The density around the parts of the site where it adjoins the existing residential areas, I don't think would be unduly high to the point where it jars visually or in terms of character. And I think the purpose of slightly lower density at the fringe it's not, from our perspective, at all about value or attractiveness of properties. It's about that being the again the threshold between the edge of the settlement and the countryside, and higher density being less appropriate at that kind of urban rural fringe. In terms of flood risk, yes. So there's not fundamental flood risk within this site that would rule it out from in principle. Obviously, further work would need to be done as part of any planning applications to demonstrate exactly how there would be nil detriment from this. But again, the work needed in the current days to demonstrate a site is acceptable in flood risk is very, very robust. So we're looking at things like I would have to double check the exact technicalities, but I believe it's a 1 in 1,000 year events that you have to cater for. So it's not the flood work isn't founded upon dealing with your everyday rain events. It goes a lot further than that. The footpath on Port Road, there will be scope to improve that across the frontage of the site and linking to Waycock Cross if this site were developed. Again, then we came on to connections, again, education, shopping and GPs. And again, my perspective on that is that we're not saying every journey could be made on foot or by bike, but this is still nevertheless a sustainable location in close proximity, and any car-borne trips would be short, and the range of options exist. In terms of the placemaking charter, I mean, one of the first points raised was the benefit of the community, and planning is a balance, and there are 101 different considerations that we have to look at when we look at planning applications and when we look at kind of plan preparation like this. But providing housing for those that don't have it, I think, is absolutely at the heart of providing for our communities. It's not one-dimensional. That doesn't deal with all the placemaking charter, but failing to deal with our housing need and failing to deal with the needs of our communities certainly also wouldn't work towards satisfying what the placemaking charter is all about. Waycock Cross. Is it easier to push through relative to North East Barry? I mean, no, it's not about pushing it through. For us, it's about what's the most appropriate site is. The reason that we advocated for the North East Barry site initially was that because it was a bigger site and actually had potentially the critical mass to deliver more in the way of mixed uses, and that would have been really positive. There were fundamental reasons why we couldn't move forward with that site, and we certainly couldn't have arrived at a plan examination advocating for a site which we didn't have any confidence could come forward during the plan period, because then we're not going to be meeting the housing need that we've identified. The Waycock Cross site was not deemed unsuitable or fundamentally unacceptable in planning or sustainability terms when it was not promoted in the strategy in 2024. It was just that we felt there were benefits potentially to the northeast site, which made it a preferential option. But given the deliverability issues there, we've returned to this site, which we also believe is fundamentally acceptable in planning terms. Green wedge can't be changed at any time. As I said, it's really through this, this plan period is a 15-year process, and it's when we are looking at these fundamental and strategic issues of housing and employment need through the preparation of a new development plan. That's when we look at, is there merit, is there overriding merit in redrawing the line of a green wedge, looking at harm caused by that, looking at what the remaining gap would be. So I just want to emphasise that just because a green wedge boundary can be amended in a development plan relative to the previous plan, that doesn't mean that it can be continually amended through the course of that plan period. Again, kind of back to placemaking charter and talking about health and well-being of people. And again, that's multifaceted, and it's not all about having a house, but having a home, having somewhere to live is absolutely at the core of health and well-being. And again, I think that is such a central thread of the placemaking charter, of our corporate plan, of everything we're trying to do, everything the planning system is trying to do. As I said just now, planning is a balance, and this plan will mean different things for different people. Everybody has different priorities in life, depending on where you live, what stage of life you're at, and what your needs are. And this plan will do its best to deal with all of those things as far as possible, but it can't be the perfect plan for everybody. Some people need housing, some people need better, quicker access to their jobs, better healthcare, and we are trying to balance all of those things. So whilst we will try and mitigate traffic and transport issues as far as possible, that's balanced against a lot of other things, and we feel there is a positive and appropriate balance to be struck here. We feel we can put a big dent in housing need in Barry and in the Vale, and in a way which mitigates traffic. I know the last speaker referred to previous decisions and reference to adverse highways impacts on Waycock Cross. So I guess the question is why the difference now? Well, we're looking to structure growth across a number of sites now, where all sites can make a contribution to mitigation measures. This site in isolation would never be able to deliver all of the mitigation at a junction like Waycott Cross. It would be very expensive and it wouldn't be viable. But we have the ability through a new development plan to provide that strategic mitigation with contributions from multiple sites, and that couldn't be done with one site alone. And that's why we feel this is different to the previous planning application, which didn't have the scope to make these mitigations. And also it should be noted that the mitigation is likely to be reliant on works at the roundabout, increasing capacity around the roundabout, excuse me, but also widening the Port Road across the frontage of the site. So this site is actually really important in providing land to make those comprehensive kind of capacity improvements. So if we were to look at progressing the other sites further west and not this site, it makes it much more difficult to make those improvements. And as Councillor Sivanianam said, if this site can't be progressed, then we still need to respect the fact we're in the growth area. We still need to respect the fact that we have housing need. And we then need to look at other options. But this is the best site in our view, in tandem with the others, for enabling a lot of those mitigation works to take place. I'm sorry if I've missed a couple of points. One last key point just to make, and it's about connectivity and things, and about kind of capacity at the train station. Of course, there is also Barry Docks train station, which has got a lot of capacity in terms of parking. I know that's slightly further from the site than Barry train station is, but I'm just trying to emphasise there are a range of options for folks making journeys, away from this site. Please pick me up if I've missed any, or if any of those points come up again from members. Thanks for indulging me on that long response, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Ian, for working through those. And according to my notes, I think you covered all the key points that were raised. But if anything's been missed, I'm sure councillors will pick that up when they also raise issues and ask questions. I know that there are some non-committee members who also want to speak on this issue. So can I invite Councillor Brandon Dodd to speak first, please? Councillor, you have no more than 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak. This came up a lot with my election regards to Waycott Cross. I've received a statement from one of my residents who wished me to speak on their behalf, if that's okay, if I can say that. Okay. The data underpinning the discussion is very limited at best. One environmental study and a single visit has been undertaken with very limited scope, and by its own admission, further studies at different seasons of the year are required. Likewise, the environmental mitigation measures put forward by Permanent House in the site plans come nowhere near the recommended by the ecological appraisal. The whole development is in its proposed form, also falls short of the Town 5 Welsh Government principle that development should provide a net benefit for biodiversity with no significant loss for habitats. Likewise, the baseline transport data being used to model the Waycott Cross Junction is from a severely limited data set. One single day of transport data collection and observation have been used back in 2023. Since this date, a number of new housing projects have been completed further down in the Vale areas, such as St Athan, and it is likely that the traffic numbers are already considerably higher than those being used as baseline for the transport modelling. The assessment itself also states that the operational capacity issues are likely to be resolved if all proposed development at the site and others within the wide area go ahead. It also states that a degree of mitigation measures are required whenever the level of future development traffic flows, yet certain arms of Waycott Cross Junction have a likelihood to become over capacity with scope for improvement. Little discussion has been given to the deliverability of the required junction mitigation in terms of ownership and conservation status of surrounding farm and woodland. Likewise, little discussion has been devoted to the cost of these measures, simply that the developers will be required to make contribution. It appears that even if the traffic mitigation measures were proceeded, the local ratepayer should be on the hook for the large proportion of the cost. Likewise, there is no discussion around the time frame of these improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodd. I can see that there are some councillors with hands up, but I'm going to take first the non-committee members who've pre-registered to speak on this issue. So Councillor Gillian Bruce, please.
Excuse me, sorry. Thank you for letting me speak. I would ask for consideration for this to be not included in the RLDP at the development at northwest of Barry, Waycott Cross. With an exponential increase in traffic as a result of the college being built at Porthcurry Road, it will become even more challenging. There is a housing development to be built as well, which is north of the railway line within Roos, with an additional 300 houses plus, therefore creating more traffic chaos. The bus company has already had to alter its schedule, removing some of the stops as it goes through Roos because of the 20-mile-an-hour limit, and there is only one train per hour for the residents of Roos. So therefore, they need to use their cars. 2.7 of the report indicates that even with the remodelling of the provision to provide safe and efficient access to the development, it would only have a limited effect on how Waycott Cross Junction operates. This would therefore have an impact on everybody, including cyclists. And with 129 objections to this development and the report from Porthcurry Wildlife Group about bats, which are endangered, my colleague and I are against this being included in the RLDP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bruce. And then Councillor Naomi Marshalsea, please.
I'm having some technical difficulties. Can you hear me there?
Yes, we can. We can hear you and see you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm a councillor in Etted Ward, where the Northwest Barry development would be situated. I have received multiple emails from residents with genuine concerns regarding this site, which will have a big impact on them and many other people I represent. I'm aware that some of these points have previously been made this evening, but I want to reiterate the strength of feeling in Etted, and I'm speaking for them. While I do understand the need for housing, particularly social housing, I do have reservations. My main three concerns are around three issues: transport and traffic, services, and environmental impact. Firstly, transport and traffic. Through personal experience and through conversations with residents, the traffic at Waycott Cross roundabout, Pontypridd Road and along Port Road is regularly very busy, often very congested, and at times completely gridlocked. I doubt any changes to the road structure could change this. Residents from St James Crescent have told me that trying to drive out of their road at rush hour is growing to be nearly impossible. An increase in houses along this road will result in even more traffic, resulting in increased traffic safety concerns, further traffic pollution, as well as long waiting times. While I acknowledge it is preferable for people to walk and cycle from home, the distance from the planned site to Barry train station is significant, much like Mr. Holloman mentioned earlier. It is also uphill for a lot of the route back, also making cycling very challenging. Disabled and elderly residents, as well as those with young children, need to be taken into consideration. Last week, I tried walking this route as a relatively fit and able-bodied person. It took me 34 minutes at a fast pace. On the weekend, I did it again with my 7-year-old, who complained most of the way it took 44 minutes. I do not believe people will choose this option to use the train regularly, walking to the station, and definitely not those who are disabled with young children or elderly. I've also looked into buses available in this area. The B2 runs from 9:40 a.m. and that's halfway down Pontypridd Road to Barry Town Station. It runs hourly until 5:25 p.m. and it does not run on Sundays. This lack of local transport would also mean residents would be more likely to use cars. Any resident without cars could feel quite isolated. This is a particular concern for those in social housing who may have limited travel options. All of these reasons mean there will be likely to be a minimum of 376 extra cars in this already congested area. Secondly, local services. This development seems to focus on housing need, negating the need for services such as schools, medical care, and day-to-day services such as shops. Whitmore High School would currently be the catchment English secondary school for secondary school age pupils, which at the moment is oversubscribed. Many pupils within the catchment for this academic year did not get allocated to space. Many doctors' practices within the area are at capacity, with people having long waits to see a GP or nurse. There is a co-op garage shop close to the site, but this requires walking alongside a busy road and walking through the garage car park. The closest supermarket is a walk along a 50 miles per hour road. Local services are already stretched. Can the existing infrastructure absorb this scale of growth? This development is not in keeping with the ethos of a 15-minute community, where everything a person needs should be within a 15-minute walk of the area they live. I believe we should be advocating for that, for residents currently here and those in the future. And thirdly, green wedge and environmental impact. The land in question, as we know, is a designated green wedge, meant to prevent urban sprawl and preserve the character of the countryside. This is in a time where we are in both a climate and biodiversity crisis. To west of Waycott's Cross roundabout is a prominent and really sensitive boundary between urban and rural life. It's a clear-cut and defensible boundary. The view across fields to the woods of Porthcurry Park would be lost. If it's always okay to build next to such locations, it opens the floodgates to unchecked urban creep. So to conclude, I'm not arguing against housing altogether. Our community needs homes, particularly affordable ones. But development must be thoughtful, sustainable and responsible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Perry, I can see you've got your hand up, but I'm going to bring Councillor Charles in next as a non-committee member. So Councillor Janice Charles, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the public speakers who spoke very, very well and made all the relevant points. And our last council speaker who covered the buses, the transport and the doctors. So I'll try not to double up on everything that's been said. As I say, I think the public speakers were excellent. But in 2.5, can you give us examples of the balanced package of measures and targeted highway improvements and initiatives to encourage more sustainable travel are likely to be? I, for one, I might cycle to the station, but I certainly wouldn't want to cycle uphill all the way back. The sustainable travel, I think at the moment is quite unreasonable, and that needs to be brought to the attention of us with what improvements will be made. And not just at Waycott Cross, but the rest of the roads to Culverhouse Cross that are definitely going to be affected by this. And also, as I think was mentioned, the rest of Barry are going to be suffering because of this rather large development. Which alternative routes are being referred to in 2.8? The report is assuming more people will be working from home. The report suggests the only way to make this work is to have less traffic. And it's been talked, the flooding, drainage and sewerage has been talked about. And those who know the area very well, as I do, the overflow in Porthcurry Park has not been sustainable for a long, long time, which is why Porthcurry stinks and also is silted up everywhere. This build is going to cause more problems for traffic in the Vale. Travelling on these roads, the alternative routes, which in the report says that one should use instead, the only alternative routes I can think of are those involving traffic through narrow country lanes, not designed for this type of traffic. I don't want to go over all the points that have been made by our public speakers, because I think they made excellent points and they covered everything. But I do hope that this committee will consider them very seriously. I'm not against more homes. I understand with the huge 6,500, I think it is, on our waiting list for homes now, it is very important. But as our previous speaker said, we must address these in a very logical way as well. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any other non-committee members who want to come in at this point? No? Okay, thank you. Ian, can I invite you to respond to those points? I think you've already responded to a number of them. So if possible, if you can avoid going over points you've already made, pick up anything new, and then we'll move on to the debate with committee members. Thank you.
Will do. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll try and be brief as I can. Councillor Dodd mentioned a point about net benefit, and that's absolutely a fundamental now of planning policy. I know it can sound counterintuitive to say that developing greenfields is going to provide a net benefit, but there is scope to create, a very diverse range of habitats, such that intensive habitat creation, if you like, that we can achieve these net benefits even where we're developing something that's a greenfield at the moment. Improvements that I've alluded to earlier in terms of the junction, they don't rely at this stage. What we looked at, they don't rely on third-party land, so they can be delivered within the scope of the adopted highway. And the viability work done thus far suggests that the cost of them can be met by these various developments. Just want to emphasise at this time that planning policy is generally not about making it easier to drive in the car. Now, we also don't want to gridlock everywhere, but planning policy is about encouraging people to change their travel habits. And we've all got a responsibility to do that and to make different choices where we can. And not everybody can, but we have our shared responsibility there. But sorry, I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, sorry, to go back to the point, the improvements, they can be funded. That's what I was going to say. We want to strike the right balance. So I'm not advocating that we take a very purist approach of planning policy says you should almost make it as difficult as possible for people to drive and force people out of the car. I know that's not realistic and that's not what people want and that's not what people are telling us through the consultation. So we are striking what we feel is the right balance between mitigating that traffic as far as possible, but also prioritising those other key points of need. Just in terms of Councillor Bruce's point, Councillor Bruce said, that they would only be limited improvements. That was just in relation to a signalised junction and localised widening. When I've referred to more substantive mitigation at the junction, that is through a more comprehensive package of improvement works at that junction. And finally, just on Councillor Marshall's points, we don't underestimate the strength of feeling in listed ward or in any of the wards where these allocations are proposed, and we see it all the time with planning applications for new housing. They understandably bring concerns. I just want to emphasise that we can't underestimate the strength of feeling of the 300 households currently in critical housing need who don't necessarily represent themselves for this kind of process. I also don't assume that there's only 122 people objecting to this because we only had 122 objections. We know there will be more feeling against the site than that, but representing the needs of Isted Ward goes beyond just looking at traffic concerns. Notwithstanding my feeling that we can positively mitigate the traffic, we need to be looking at everybody in Isted Ward and the needs of all of these people. And one of the struggles we have in kind of the planning process is reaching all parts of all communities and getting everybody to feel like they've got a voice and they can contribute. And unfortunately, sometimes the people that are in housing need don't engage in this kind of process, and I just want to make sure that they are not deprioritised as a consequence of not vocalising their own feelings and their own needs through this kind of process. All the other points that Councillor Marshall made very, very valid in terms of infrastructure and facilities, but I think I've dealt with those generally through the previous section. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Committee, we've been going for 90 minutes and I'm well known for not giving us a break. So I'm going to make sure that we do have a break. I'm going to suggest that we just take 5 minutes to stretch our legs. So we will come back together at 20 to 8 and then committee members can debate the issues. Thank you, everybody. 5 minutes. Can we start the recording again, please?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we're back. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee. We'll resume. So we now move on to committee members, your opportunity to ask any questions, make any comments. If I can start with Councillor Ian Perry, please. Councillor Perry.
Hi, I'm glad in some ways for that break, because some of the speakers before me were too good to follow. So hopefully you've forgotten half of what they said in that 5-minute break. So thank you to all of them. I've got a different viewpoint to the cabinet member who is aspirational for growth, and I'm more aspirational for efficiency and being more efficient with the resources and the housing we've got, rather than growth and new. Mr. Hart mentioned that the house builders are in for profit, not for people. And of course, they're certainly not in for planet. We never get onto the planet. And I want to thank Naomi Marshall-C for what she contributed and bringing up the 15-minute city, which is very, very important, because we need to start providing infrastructure and transport networks before we put in the housing. And what we're doing again in this plan is putting in lots and lots and lots of new housing, and then we'll all drive and we'll mitigate the problems as we've been doing. And if you're getting as old as me, or perhaps if you're older, you can remember when Culverhouse Cross was a very small roundabout with no congestion, and it got bigger and they got put signals on it. And if you go down there now, you've got constant queues. 5 Mile Lane, which is now Waycott Road, used to be very quiet. There's so much traffic going up and down there all the time. And if development goes ahead at Model Farm, what's going to come at the airport, it's more and more traffic, and it'll all be mitigated. And I'm not quite sure how you mitigate Culverhouse Cross, Dry Rotary with the spatial confines. I do know Mr. Holloman raised housing for the elderly, and we all seem to be short of bungalows. All the people seem to be being put into flats, 1-bedroom flats in the Vale of Glamorgan, and we don't seem to be building any bungalows. He also mentioned floodwater management, and the floodwater management we seem to be doing is for the climate in 2025 and not 2070. We know that the climate is changing. There's irreversible climate change, some natural, but a lot of it is human induced because of our carbon footprint. So we're not really thinking far into the future. We're thinking about the here and now and the rainfall we expect here and now, and we're not really thinking about the future. I like some of the comments of isn't it important on the green wedge, and that we can change our minds within the space of a few weeks in planning. I'm concerned also about the cost of this to the public purse. So we build houses. People say that council tax increases as a result of additional houses, but that's only a third of a council's income. And we all know how councils are short of funds at the moment, and services are being cut. And apparently we're going to have the same conversations on budget in a few weeks' time as we did last year, and the year before, and the year before that, and the year before that. For the last 15 years, that's austerity 2.0. Rachel Reeves styles continues. So as a local authority, can the Vale of Glamorgan afford to service these houses? And that is bin collections, schools, but also the repair of the highway, and the new highway and changes that we need. And can the Welsh Government afford it? So there seems to be no cost factor into servicing these new houses. And obviously it's all car development. And yes, they're all going to have their own driveways, and we have electric cars, but there are more and more vehicles, more and more journeys, and short trips are a problem because you've got the carbon footprint of building those additional vehicles. And what we need to do is reduce car ownership. So saying we're making trips shorter isn't solving the problem. It's mitigating it slightly, but we've got a climate crisis, apparently, a climate emergency, whichever you want to call it. It's not good enough, and we really need to think about how we design our houses so that people can choose not to have a car, whereas we are building new developments where you must have a car, as people have said earlier. So this is, again, us failing to build in the infrastructure, the doctor surgeries. Can we afford the doctor surgeries? Do we have enough trained doctors in this area? These problems we're not even discussing. And I'm thinking now, having studied and lived in the Netherlands and what I saw there, where they're building on water, but for many years they have built for accessibility. And there's examples like Hooton, where the whole town is designed around encouraging active travel, and that is what we should be doing.
Councillor Perry, forgive me for interrupting you. If you have a question, please ask it. What you're making is a speech, and that's fine. When councillors make speeches, they only have 5 minutes, and your 5 minutes is up. So I'm afraid.
5 minutes.
Well, I know, but I'm afraid you need to draw that to a close. If you have a question, please ask it now. Otherwise, I'm going to move on.
I will ask quickly. I also obviously just touched on the question of the council's finances when we build all these additional houses, whether we're better off or worse off. I suspect worse off because of the cost of servicing these houses, but also the carbon footprint. And what is the carbon footprint in a climate emergency of the actual building? Never mind the in use. I mean, say we're going to put solar panels on, that's negligible when you think about the carbon that goes into the concrete to build these, and the hard landscaping and the water and from hard landscaping. How do we minimise the hard surface area? And permeable surfaces, they block up after 15 years, so it's very, very short term. So I want to know how we're going to measure carbon footprint, and it's not even been talked about, or it's been kind of dismissed and pushed under the carpet a little bit and greenwashed.
Thank you very much,
I'm not allowed to say any more. So thank you for my 5 minutes.
Yep, that's fine. So, Ian, I think 2 questions. If the population of the Vale of Barry increases, does the Vale Council get more money to meet the cost of the additional services that need to be provided? And secondly, in terms of the new housing developments, how does that impact on the council's commitment in terms of reducing our carbon footprint? Thank you.
Yeah, could I just clarify that slightly? The thing on the cost is obviously we'll get more money, but we're already short of money, and houses have got a cost of servicing.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thanks. Some of those costs will be mitigated by the development, so where they relate to potentially community facilities or education, and as Councillor Perry notes, there would be council tax. I have to say at this point, delivering for growth and delivering to meet housing need is never about generating council tax. It's a popular theory, but whilst I've got the platform to say it's not about that, I'm going to say it's not about that. It's about meeting housing need and giving people better places to live. I couldn't say that all the costs in relation to council services that residents would need would be met by Section 106 contributions, but that's not a reasonable test for whether this site should be included in the development plan, and that's more an issue of the principle of growth, I guess, and we're not there because the council has already approved the strategy and the level of growth. This is about where that growth goes. But in any case, I don't think a development site could reasonably be held to mitigate every single cost like that. And in terms of carbon footprint, I obviously can't be specific about that at this point. Members may note that we have been trying to progress policies in relation to net zero buildings, and subject to viability, that's still something we're keen to do. The viability process is ongoing, but we are trying to be really forward thinking and proactive and progressive in the Vale in respect of net zero and going beyond potentially building regulations, which isn't something which planning policy normally does. It's something that Planning Policy Wales advocates can happen, and in areas where there may be viability, like potentially the Vale, we want to push that as far as possible. So I can't give an exact number, but all I can say is we're trying to be as progressive as we can on that issue, but it is subject to viability, which is an ongoing assessment.
Thank you very much, Ian. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, I just want to say to Ian and his team, I think this is a report that has been well prepared, as one of the other residents said at the very start. Whether we agree with it or not is something I'll come on to. But it does show that when, planning is one of those places where residents come up against the hard edge of the council, is one of the times they get involved more and more. And I think it shows the council being responsive. So thank you, Ian. Whether they respond properly or not is another matter. The other thing, I think it's a shame that there's not more councillors in the room tonight to listen directly to residents. I think that's really important. I think sometimes you're only doing it through a screen, you don't get the full insight into what people are saying. So I want to thank you for coming tonight. I really do appreciate it. I got like good, bad and ugly. There's three parts to this proposal today. The one that we spent a lot of time on, I'll come on to last. The first one is in my ward on Neptune Way. I think that's a good development. I think that's indicated by the amount of people who supported it. And I think it should be supported. To take Ian's point, Ian referenced the 300 people who are in acute housing need. It's 100% affordable housing. Now, I concern myself a bit with the term affordable. I think this needs to be social housing that fits the needs of people so they can afford to go in there. So good, bad and indifference, that's the good one, and I think that's to be supported. Bad, well, no, so good, bad and ugly, I meant. Bad, Bendrix development. I think one of the things that it's been a shame, a lot of the issues that have been brought up in the northwest of Barry also pertain to the Bendrix development. The difference between the Bendrix development and the northwest of Barry is an issue of poverty more often than not. And we've got people who aren't here tonight having their say and being able to put their point across. So Councillor Millie Collins has put that across previously and recently, and I want to reiterate some of the points she's made there. Largely, it's about accessibility to transport. The bus routes to the Bendrix are dire. You would never want to walk from the Bendrix to any of the train stations. A lot of it walks through the docks. You have to actually go through ABP's land to do it. So this, in and of itself, needs to be sorted. The development, because it's 100% affordable, again, I think it's something broadly that we should be looking at making happen. But to do that, we've got to make sure the services are there in the first instance. And I think too often than not, we put things back and say these will be developed in the future. And it's the same as been done in the northwest of Barry. And there's an issue of trust here, because I think people realise that when push comes to the shove, these things don't get done at the end of the day, and people are left with the consequences who end up living in these developments. I think we come on to the ugly then. There's a reason that this was pushed back previously in the northwest of Barry. But one thing it might be worth just considering, this isn't the first time the green wedge has been et into. There may be residents today, I'm sure there are, who've complained you're on the Nant Tallow development. There's those who may be on the Millwood development. These were all points where this council gave up the green wedge for development. This development is a profit-related development. And interestingly, Councillor Burnett's point about developers are here for profiteering was in relation to the waterfront development, which is in my ward. And I am really concerned that what we've got here is a development that just be of properties that will be there for people, for commuter properties that people will be working outside, perhaps in Cardiff and elsewhere. The 30% affordable housing is insufficient in this space, but ultimately the whole location is wrong for all of the reasons. And I'm not going to repeat them. I think Councillor Charles making the point of let's not repeat things that have been said before. They've been said well. The transport infrastructure is insufficient. The proximity to the train station, which I think is a really good RDLP presumption, this just doesn't make sense. You know, I'm impressed that Councillor Marshy managed to do it in 42 minutes, because if you went the way back with most people, I don't think they'd be able to do it in that time. I think this needs to be pushed back. I wonder where are other developments that should be part of this RDLP. So, for example, and I'd be interested in where the college development is on off Calcott Road. Also, we previously had the Western Gateway. Be interested to why that's no longer here. There may be good reasons for it, but I'd like to know why it's not. And then we talked briefly, and I'll finish with a point about density. We've built properties of density in the waterfront and elsewhere. We've crunched things together. One of the things that's involved as well is the open spaces have all been managed by external parties. It's something that is proven. If you had anybody from the waterfront here tonight, they'd be saying that it doesn't work. If this does happen and we end up with the same sort of management facilities for the open spaces in this new development, we will be putting them in the same position as we've done before. We know it doesn't work. So I'd really appreciate your perspective on that, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Ian, can you respond to those points, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yep. Hayes Road and connectivity. Yeah, as Councillor Hooper notes, there are bus routes, and the bus stops are close to the site. I guess it's a building community down there. So when I first dealt with a planning application on not the council development, the one just around the corner from that, there was only really housing along the main road, and that's been consolidated by that development, and then the in my opinion very impressive council development, and this would consolidate that further, and I think that is building towards a sense of community in that part of the town. The connectivity is not perfect. There are bus routes. There is a perfectly walkable route along Hayes Road towards Sully, and there is a cycle route, potential cycle route, future cycle route identified through the Docks Road in the existing LDP, and that would obviously be subject to funding. But I don't think there's any sort of fundamental prohibitive connectivity issues to that site. In terms of the points on Waycock Cross, other sites, College, Barry Gateway, etc. So the housing need, and kind of the housing supply that we propose to kind of meet through the RLDP is made up of allocations and windfall developments. So by windfall, I mean things that aren't allocated that come along at some point during the plan period to contribute towards housing supply. And that can be as little as 1 unit, a house being converted into 2 flats, or it could be 60, 70, 80 units like the flats built across from the dock office. But if we did do an urban capacity study to look at kind of what capacity there is within the town, what likelihood there is of major developments coming forward. Arguably, we could allocate all those, but we'd only be taken away from our windfall projections. So we'd be kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So if we did allocate College and Barry Gateway, to use 2 examples, that would just mean that our windfall projections come down. So the overall housing supply wouldn't be any higher. So we couldn't use those instead of Waycock Cross, for example, because the windfall number would be lower, so we still wouldn't be meeting our overall number. Yes, there are windfall sites likely to come forward in good and sustainable locations, but yeah, it's a combination of those windfalls and the allocations that we need. Open spaces, I share Councillor Hooper's frustration in respect to this, and I'm hugely frustrated about how some of the open spaces are being delivered and maintained on the waterfront. It is regrettable that we don't have the powers to force developers to transfer sites to us, so developers can transfer with a commuted son for the council to manage, or they can appoint a management company. Fundamentally, there needs to be a management plan in place, and it can rely on enforcement of failures to adhere to that, which is not easy, but it is enforceable. That's not to say that going forward we shouldn't be trying to be more, I don't know whether creative is the right word, but more creative or more forward thinking about different ways to encourage or incentivize transfer, even if we can't legally obligate it. And I've thought in the past about potentially roles of towns and community councils, subject to sums of monies and funding. Is that an option if developers won't transfer to the council? I'm just speculating on the range of options. I guess the key point I'm getting to is I think there does need to be more thought on that. I can't say hand on heart that if this site is allocated that we will be able to insist on a different model to the one that exists on the waterfront, but I would support the concept of trying to do everything we can to try and make sure we can deliver a different model if possible.
Thank you very much. Anything from any other committee members? I've got a couple of questions. Otherwise, Councillor Norman, I saw you had your hand up earlier. If you want to come back in, please do. Ian, the issue that struck me is that the report notes that the additional housing that's proposed will not meet locally projected need, and it also notes that there are no other suitable brownfield sites available in Barry other than, as you've just described, potentially some windfall sites. And I'm just wondering, what does that mean for the future? And as residents have raised, green wedges are locally designated, I take your point that that doesn't mean that, you know, the council would be routinely making decisions to remove green wedges, but it does concern me that if we're saying this isn't going to meet projected need, there is a shortage of brownfield sites within Barry, and the green wedges are locally designated and not fixed in statute, then how are we going to be able to ensure that green spaces are protected for future generations? I don't know whether that's a question that you can answer. Please do.
Yeah, I mean, when I say answer, I don't mean answer as in I can tell you this is definitely how it's going to happen. Yeah, if this plan is adopted, then in the future there will need to be another development plan again, and it's possible we might need to be looking at some green spaces now. In the meantime, you know, as you're aware, the council is working in partnership with Lovells, you know, a really kind of again, kind of ambitious and positive programme of ramping up the council's supply of affordable housing. And it's not just the council, there are active registered social landlords in the Vale, and we are seeing high rates of affordable housing delivery. I think we do have a policy about not seeking Section 106 on developments of up to 25 units, and I'm not aware of that kind of being a commonplace measure in other councils. I think it's a relatively novel thing. It is at the cost of potentially some other contributions, but it shows us prioritising affordable housing delivery, and affordable housing delivery rates have been really strong since we did introduce that policy. So yeah, over the next plan period, we need to be thinking of, are there other novel interventions we can be making to stimulate, you know, even more affordable housing delivery in the right locations. So yeah, you know, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be trying to deal with that need as efficiently as possible within the scope of an adopted plan, and again trying to limit as far as possible, you know, greenfield use come the next plan period. But there's probably a lot of very deep rooted long-standing kind of macro issues which are at play, which are why you know, affordable housing need is so high, and you know, a local development plan alone is not going to be able to deal with those. Those are, you know, huge social and economic and cultural issues which are, you know, probably been building over time in relation to the the housing markets as well. So I haven't got the answer. All I guess I can say from our perspective is being as positive and proactive and creative as we can be when it comes to facilitating affordable housing and the right kind of housing in the right places. That's the kind of, and put the biggest dent in it that we can.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I mean, I think you raised a really important point earlier when you spoke about the voices that are not being heard in this committee, and that's the people who are sat on our housing waiting list, you know, desperately needing housing. So I do recognise the challenge around that balance in terms of, you know, protecting green spaces and the environment, and also ensuring that we're responding to the needs of people who desperately need homes. And that brings me to my next question, which is around the environmental issues. So Natural Resource Wales' original submission in 2023 included the need to ensure that environmental survey requirements were undertaken at sites in liaison with the local authority ecologist. Am I right in thinking that post is currently vacant, or have we managed to fill it? And if it is vacant, then how are we going to ensure that that local expertise and knowledge is included in the environmental survey process?
It's not vacant currently. It's the existing post holder is due to depart at the end of the year, but we have appointed somebody. They've not started yet, but they will be, well, subject to their notice period. And that is a really experienced ecologist with local knowledge. So I feel very positive about the contribution that ecologist will be able to make over the next, well, however long they're in post, but hopefully at least 10 years. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, did you want to come back in? And then if there are no, I think Councillor Norman, you did have your hand up, so I'm going to give you the opportunity after Councillor Hooper.
I'm just going to be really...
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian. Just a few points. I don't want to go what's been said before. A lot of people complaining about these developments, and understandably it infringes on a lot of people's lives. I myself have been caught up in traffic at Waycock Cross on many an occasion. But firstly, no other sites have been suggested. And to reiterate what Councillor Sivignan has spoken about, if it's not on these sites, where are they going to go? Are they going to go further out into the Vale? Are they going to build out into the rural Vale to accommodate people who don't want to live in the rural Vale? They want to live in the centre of Barry, therefore taking houses from people in the rural Vale who want to stay there. It's all very difficult. It's a big juggling act, and I don't envy Ian and his team one iota. But I do think we need to look at this carefully, and we need housing. People want to stay in Barry, and unless other sites are found, I think these 3 sites are the only ones that are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I did see in the councils, in terms of the consultation, I think Taylor Wimpey and Avent Homes talked about other candidate sites, and the council is saying, you know, they are not being brought forward at this stage because it's considered that the northwest site in particular is a preferable option. I don't know if you can respond to that along with Councillor Norman's comments.
I was just checking with Vic which one Taylor Wimpey was. My understanding is that potentially relates to a 3rd phase in Sully, but that's on best and most versatile agricultural land, where there's a really strong policy presumption against development. And Avant, I think, will be North East Barry.
No, that's inside the higher end.
Oh, right. Sorry. I thought that was North East Barry. Snathan, the higher end. So there's at the moment, I don't think there's an adequate access for that. Certainly, I think it would be very difficult to achieve access from higher end. But furthermore, we are proposing relatively large allocations in St Athan. We need to be careful about not overloading one area. And whilst we have, again, really positive and optimistic aspirations for strengthening the role of St Athan as, you know, within the region, particularly given its close relationship to the employment land, we are already proposing to allocate in St Athan, so I think the balance would be wrong to push more to St Athan and not be prioritising Barry over St Athan.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, just a brief point, and picking up point you just made, Chair, if I may. You talked about the 300 people on the waiting list who do deserve our concern. Just to make the point, they will not be housed in this development in the north west of Barry. So this is a point that we just need to be careful we don't conflate one and the other. This is a private development mainly for huge profits.
Yeah, please do respond to that.
I just want to clarify, there would be a policy requirement for 30% affordable housing. So yeah, it wouldn't be all the 300, but it's not all private. It wouldn't be all private development either.
Thank you. So I see no other hands, and I am going to attempt to draw this together very, very briefly and pull together some recommendations from Cabinet with the assistance of committee. So I think what we've heard overwhelmingly is we've heard concerns around the Northwest Barry site in particular, concerns about the impact on the environment, concerns about the impact on traffic congestion, concerns about the infrastructure on local services, and question marks about whether or not there is sufficient infrastructure to meet the proposed increased need, and also concern about the impact on local residents, both at the Northwest site and also Bendrix. So here we go. I'm going to try to set out some recommendations based on that, and I'm going to do it one by one. So I'll propose a recommendation. We'll see if we've got any seconders for them. So let's talk about the Northwest Barry site first. I'm going to suggest a recommendation that says the committee is concerned about the potential for increased and inappropriate use of protected environmental sites in the vicinity of North West Barry. And it's recommended that suitable, accessible, natural green spaces are provided as part of any site development to benefit wider diversity interests and species in the area. That's the recommendation. Is there a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Norman?
I second.
Thank you. Another recommendation in relation to the environment is that, sorry.
Point of
Councillor
order.
Hooper, please.
Are we going to pick these up one by one? Because I wouldn't. So would we perhaps vote on this particular one? Or are you going to go through all the recommendations first?
No, we can move to a vote. Yep. So, yes. So that recommendation has been proposed and seconded, and we will move to a vote on the recommendation. So to remind you, the recommendation is that there should be suitable, accessible, natural green spaces provided as part of any site development in North West Barry to benefit the wider biodiversity interests and species in the area.
Chair, can I propose an amendment to that?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Thank you. Can I propose that all that's deleted and this particular site is taken off the our LDP proposed plan?
I don't think that you can negate the recommendation entirely. I think that will have to come as a separate recommendation. I'll look to officers to, yeah. So we're going to vote on this recommendation first, and then if you want to propose that as a recommendation, we will move to a vote on that. Councillor Perry, do you have a point of order in relation to the recommendations?
Yeah, I was just wondering if it can be amended so that that land would be managed by the council and not a private company. I don't know if that's possible.
We can come to that separately, Councillor Perry. So this is just entirely about the environmental issues at this stage. But if you want to propose that as a recommendation subsequently, we'll come to that separately. The vote has started, so in the chamber, if you support that recommendation, you click your green button. If you don't, you click your red button. If you wish to abstain, you click your blue button. This is just for committee members. And then online, you should see your voting buttons.
Just to say, Chair, everyone should have voted now.
Thank you, and I believe that recommendation is agreed. Yes.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hooper, you wanted to propose a recommendation?
Yeah, I'd like to propose the recommendation that the site at East Barry that's Northwest Barry that's caused so much concern tonight we recommend to Cabinet that this is taken off the proposed candidate plan.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation?
Yeah, could I second that?
Thank you. So we move to a vote.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, the vote will be recorded. So again, the vote, I think what's in front of us is incorrect. It says the site for North East Barry is removed. It should be the site for North West Barry is removed. Sorry, we'll have to redo this vote.
Just amending the vote now, Chair.
Thank you.
Let's start it again now, Chair.
Thank you.
I believe everyone has voted now, Chair. We'll put the individual results up as well now.
Yes, so that vote is not carried. That recommendation will not go forward. Coming back to the debate that we've had this evening and some of the other issues before us, I've also talked about we've heard concerns about the impact on traffic congestion. So I'm going to suggest a recommendation that says, and I did look at just to talk to this a little bit, I did look at some of the detail in the appendix, which talked about that improvements to Waycott Cross Junction would not necessarily mitigate the full impact of traffic congestion. So the recommendation I'm going to suggest is that committee is concerned to note that modelling shows the outline proposed improvements to Waycott Cross Junction indicate adverse impacts on traffic congestion. The strategic transport assessment, therefore, must identify mitigating action which will significantly address traffic congestion and minimise the impact of additional traffic on nearby feeder routes, and that mitigation should include improved public transport and support for active travel. And that is the recommendation. Is there a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Norman?
I second.
Thank you very much. And we'll move to a vote on that recommendation, please.
I just set up a recorded vote now, Chair. I believe it's starting now, Chair, if members wish to vote. Right. I believe everyone has voted now, Chair. We'll bring up the individual results now.
Thank you. That recommendation is carried. And then still on North West Barry, there were concerns raised around infrastructure and local services. The recommendation states that the report notes the development will result in the need for increased school places and potentially additional health capacity. Any additional development must not impact negatively on current provision for residents. Committee notes that more detailed information will be provided at the deposit plan stage. These details must include specific steps that will be taken to protect and improve educational and health capacity. And is there a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Norman?
I second.
Thank you very much. Are we moving for a vote? Yes, I think we're moving for a vote on all of these issues. Thank you.
And do you want that, is that to be recorded, Councillor Chair?
Yes,
okay.
please.
Yeah. We're setting up the vote now. I believe everyone has voted no, Chair, so we'll bring up the results and the individual results.
Thank you. That recommendation is carried. Councillor Perry, you'd suggested something earlier, and forgive me, I've forgotten what you suggested. Do you want to come in and let us know if you had a recommendation? I'm going to move on to some additional recommendations in relation to the other sites, but was there anything specific that you wanted to recommend that we haven't already voted on?
Yeah, all this due public open space needs to be managed by the public sector, whether it's the town, if it's not the Vale Glamorgan Council, it needs to be town or community council, and we should be actively setting in place policies to prevent these private companies taking hold of our public open spaces and our streets.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So let's try and turn that into a recommendation. Is this just in relation to North West Barry? Councillor Perry, can you clarify?
Well, I think that's of particular concern, as Mark Cooper raised earlier, but really it should be throughout the whole Vale of Glamorgan. We should take every action at our disposal to stop it happening again.
We can't talk about the whole of the Vale of Glamorgan, but we can talk about the 3 candidate sites that are before us this evening. So I'm going to suggest a recommendation that says, at the appropriate time, there must be a management plan in place to incentivise the transfer of open spaces to the council's control. Do you want to propose
just an
amendment?
additional bit to it, perhaps,
Please do,
and it picks up on Ian's reference earlier, that something like could include local and town and community councils as well. Will it be the town council in this regard? So not just the local authority. I think we could widen it, perhaps.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation, please? Councillor Hooper, you're seconding it, thank you, and we'll move to a vote. So, councillors, this is about a management plan being in place to incentivise the transfer of open spaces from new developments to local council control.
Is that recorded again?
Yes, please.
Question. Yeah, yeah. The vote has started. Everyone has voted, Chair. We'll bring up the individual results.
Thank you, and that recommendation is also agreed. And then there were also concerns around the Hayes Road Bendrix development. And so I'm going to propose a recommendation. There are a number of recommendations, I think, out of the issues that were raised. The first is that a community needs assessment is undertaken to identify infrastructure and transport needs in relation to the Bendrix development, and that this should include consultation with ward members and current residents. And is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Hooper.
I would like to second it, I think, but can I just add so you've talked about the community needs assessment, can we just make it clear that that needs to include public transport access and infrastructure? Because taking Ian's point that there could be, subject to funding, a active travel route and things like that, I think that's a bit too nebulous. So I just want to make sure that we are clear that public transport is part of that and not hidden away.
I do have a second recommendation that I've drafted around that. If it's helpful, let me share the second recommendation with you now to see if then the first recommendation satisfies. Second recommendation is that the strategic transport assessment must identify mitigating action which will improve accessibility to Hayes Road. That should include public transport, active travel, and should also protect access through Wimborne Road, notwithstanding its private property, private land. Are you happy to separate those two issues? Yeah, okay. So we can combine them? Yep, okay. So let's start again with the recommendation that a community needs assessment is undertaken to identify infrastructure and transport needs in relation to the Bendrix development. This should include consultation with ward members and current residents. And the scope should encompass the strategic transport assessment, which committee wants to see identify mitigating action, which will improve accessibility to public transport, active travel, and access to Wimborne Road. And can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. And we will move to a recorded vote on that recommendation.
The recorded vote has started, Chair. Right, everyone has voted, Chair, so we're bringing up the results now.
And that recommendation is approved. Thank you. Those are all the notes I have in terms of the points that's been raised in tonight's committee. Now is the opportunity for committee members to tell me if I've missed anything. If not, we're going to move on to the final agenda item for the night. Good. Then we move on. Before we do that, can I thank Ian and officers for your attendance this evening. Thank you again to members of the public for joining us this evening. You're very welcome to stay for our final agenda item, but equally I understand if you want to go and enjoy what's left of your evening. Thank you very much. So now we move on to agenda item 6, which is the updated forward work programme schedule for 25-26. This is with us for agreement tonight, committee, and Mark Thomas, the Democratic and Scrutiny Services Officer, will take us through it. Thank you, Mark.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, committee. This is the updated forward work programme schedule for 2025-26. Purpose of which is for the Place Scrutiny Committee to consider and agree the schedule and its contents, which are attached to Appendix A, with any updates that have been subsequently set out in Section 2 of the report. The committee are also asked to consider and agree to a summary of the decision tracking data relevant to the Place Scrutiny Committee being presented to the committee as part of the biannual forward work programme monitoring reports going forward. The report sets out the background and context to the forward work programme schedule following the introduction of the new scrutiny arrangements for 25-26. In terms of key issues for consideration, just to reiterate to the committee that since the committee's approval of the FWP on the 20th of May 2025, the work programme is currently being maintained by Democratic Services in consultation with service area officers in preparation for member consideration. And the latest version of the document at the time of report publication is attached to Appendix A. Any subsequent updates will be presented to the committee verbally by the Democratic and Scrutiny Services Officer present. The work programme is a proposed list of items for consideration and may be subject to change depending on prevailing circumstances. The committee, since our last discussion around the work programme, has now established a task and finish working group to look at providing greater accessibility to beaches in the Vale of Glamorgan for people with limited accessibility and other related issues or needs. The group has met on at least 4 occasions so far, as working towards presenting its findings to the committee in early 2026. The committee has considered 8 proposal reports, including references from Cabinet and full Council so far. In addition, the committee and wider elected members have been provided with 2 for information reports on separate topics. Tracking of the committee's decisions and subsequent impact continues to be monitored by Democratic and Scrutiny Services team. Due to the new scrutiny arrangements, it was necessary to review the method for collating and maintaining decision tracking across the scrutiny function as a whole. As such, a new automated system has been developed to record and publish scrutiny committee recommendations more efficiently. Decision tracking data has now been compiled and has been put in a Power BI format, which will be continually available to members via Member Met at any time. This data will be regularly updated by Democratic officers as and when updates arise. Therefore, members no longer need to wait for decision tracking information to be formally reported to committee and may raise queries with Democratic officers at any time. I'm just going to hand over to my colleague now just to show the example of where this information is kept on MemberNet. Bear with me, we're just trying to get the information up. We just had a little connection issue, bear with me. Right, bear with us a second. There we go. Thank you very much, Gareth. On MemberNet, there is a section called Scrutiny Hub where the Power BI information is kept. And this provides various decision tracking data for the various committees. This can be drilled down, for example, here with place, and then you have options about results, whether that is for updates from Cabinet once proposals have been sent there, or other recommendations that have been made to operational officers, for example. So that is all available now for members, and going forward we'll be providing a summary of this as well for future forward work programme reports. We've been currently working with ICT colleagues as well to ensure that this same decision tracking data is also readily available to members of the public via the Council Scrutiny webpage. I don't know if Gareth, you can... Oh, that is it actually. So basically there's a link via MemberNet onto the public facing side of the website as well, which also shows this data for members. If they are, for members of the public, if they are interested in the information, they can also access it that way. Now that this decision tracking data is more readily available, it's proposed that the information is no longer formally reported to Scrutiny Committee on a quarterly basis. However, Democratic Scrutiny Services officers will provide a summary on committee decisions within the biannual forward work programme reports going forward. That's all from me now, Chair. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'll obviously hand back to you in the committee for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Councillor Charles Champion, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some time ago we had a report from Welsh Water, and they were supposed to be coming back, and I didn't see anything in the sort of diary.
Sorry, Mark, do you want to respond to that? Yeah.
Bear with me a second, Councillor. I'll just double check the annex.
We do have an update on bathing water quality at designated bathing beaches in the Vale of Glamorgan, scheduled for the 20th of January, Councillor.
Yeah, but that's not the same as Welsh Water telling us how bad they've been.
That would be in essence, Councillor, that would be part of the, because previously Welsh Water involved in that presentation, so the presumption would be that Welsh Water would be involved in this presentation as well.
And it is, right, okay, thank you.
And obviously colleagues in NRW as well, if they're available.
Yeah, we can't compel external organisations to appear before committee, but we certainly will be inviting them, Councillor Champion, to come before committee again when we receive that report in January.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you, Mark, for pulling this report together. I think it's really accessible. I was going to ask a question about how accessible is to the public, this information. I think it really is good that we've got that. The only question I'd ask is that we'd follow that up with some sort of understanding whether people do access it, because it looks really appropriate and easier to access than minutes, but we want to make sure that people do follow it. And if they don't, how could we improve it? You know, things like making sure that graphs stand out and things that, you know, and I noticed those in some of the reports, but generally I really welcome it. Thank you.
Is that, can I ask a follow-up question? Is that built in to the new approach that we're taking to scrutiny, that we'll have some of those metrics that can be reported back to committee?
Yeah, so there will be, as I said, a follow-up report in future biannual reports for the work programme and have a summary of the recommendations and decision tracking. But obviously now that will be built into MemberNet. That will be updated as and when there are updates available, so members can access it. If they've got questions, they can follow that up with us directly and they don't have to wait for the biannual report. But also that will be feeding into the public facing version as well. And I take on board, obviously, Councillor Hooper's points about ensuring that it is being accessed. And I'll take that back to the principal DSO, see how we be monitoring this going forward as well.
Thank you very much, Mark. Anything from anybody else in relation to this report? If not, I move to the recommendations that committee considers and agrees the items for its forward work programme schedule for 25-26. I move that recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hooper, thank you. And also that a summary of the decision tracking data relevant to the Place Scrutiny Committee be presented to the committee as part of the biannual forward work programme monitoring reports. And I move that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Hooper, for seconding it. So that concludes our business for this evening. It just remains for me to thank you all for your contributions tonight and to remind everybody that this committee's next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, the 6th of January at 6 o'clock. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.
And just to add on that point, Chair, that will be an extraordinary meeting. And well, we'll obviously have to see on the format, but that will be an extraordinary meeting on the 6th of January. So we'll obviously update members with any further details going forward.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you all.